And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Today is going to be very interesting, Blake, because we are starting our very first 2025 preview. I couldn't be more excited.
I do think we start off with potentially one of the 12 playoff teams with the University of Texas here tonight. But in looking at Texas over the last couple of days and just over the last couple of months since the offseason started and even more into today, there are a lot of big-time things that we can talk about Texas. I do think that there are some things that you got to point out to say to yourself, like, hey, man, they went in the portal for 3 interior defensive linemen. Even though their front seven is going to be completely nasty, you go and get Brad Spence, who's from Arkansas. Is he on the opposite side of Anthony Hill? Joe, they're replacing 4 offensive linemen. They're replacing 2 wide receivers that will go in the draft. There's tons and tons of talent at Texas. But the inevitable question, and by the way, you do have an upgrade at quarterback. The ultimate question will be, you got a lot of talent. Will you continue to repeat what you've been doing? Because ironically, I think their schedule is a little bit tougher this year.
That's the part I don't agree with. So
they go to Ohio State, they go to Georgia. Last year, all of those games are at home.
I don't want to spoil that discussion, but I want to wait until we get to that a little bit later on. I actually think that their schedule is easier for some of the things that they have to encounter. But the biggest part about all of this is the replacement of a bunch of guys that are going to go on to be very highly drafted in this upcoming class.
Yes.
How does that replacement look? If the replacement goes well, they're the best team in the country. If it goes very poorly and their offensive line is underwhelming, they're going to have a lot of issues. And Arch might play well, but he's going to be on his back a lot if that offensive line does not take the step it needs to.
Well, it's a big what if. It's actually a massive what if that we will discuss here tonight. But Joe, we'll talk about and we'll give our thoughts, buy or sell some of the recruiting stock that's out there: Louisville, Kansas, Illinois, USC. We'll give our buy and sell. I feel like we're a part of Around the Horn. Rest in peace, Around the Horn, by the way, and Woody Page and the boys. But we will do a buy or sell here for the recruiting of Kansas, Illinois, Louisville, USC here. But I want to start off here. Mickey Joseph, former interim head coach in Nebraska and wide receivers coach at LSU, but now the head coach of the Grambling Tigers, came up with an interesting thought process a couple of days ago about buyouts for players that enter the transfer portal. Mickey Joseph said, and he's kind of joking here, he says to the NCAA, hey, here's a thought. If a player moves from G5 or FCS up to the P4 or up to G5 or P4 from the FCS level, the team that they're leaving needs to be paid for it. Joe, I'm going to start it off here and asking you this. Why do I feel like that might be good in principle, but realistically will just never happen?
It won't, and I kind of wonder if this is something that could happen, but like many years down the line, once we have like an actual like solidified future for the structure of the sport. But I was really intrigued by this. I don't know a whole lot about European soccer, Premier League soccer. From my understanding, they have some sort of a concept along these lines, and there's been a lot of comparisons drawn between the future of college football and how it's shaping out and how the Premier League ended up being structured and how it was put together, and also the reason for why it changed as much as it did. I think it's a great idea. If it actually comes to fruition or not, that I have no clue. But this would make up for the fact, one, for when a small school loses a guy and they produce and develop a young man and they recruit him well and he ends up turning into a superstar, they get something for it. It's just like if your coach gets hired away, there's usually buyout money that you end up getting that has to be bought out from his initial contract. But the other, that other part about this is like, do schools really think that they are going to have the money to pay for a player essentially to come to their team?
Mickey Joseph did bring up that this has been going on with coaches for decades. The problem with that thought process is coaches are employees and coaches sign contracts. Are players employees? Because the way that you've structured it right now, they're not. Now, to your point, In the future, could that happen? Sure, it could happen. But you know what my first thought when he said that was? They'll literally just use the NIL money that they're going to give the kid to pay him out, and it won't mean anything. They'll just continue to ramp up the budget to pay him out and pay to those schools. They don't care. Like, and if I'm being honest, if I feel like if you give these P4 schools and these G5 schools, even some of them, the opportunity to just go out there and say, hey, I might want to be a little shady with how I go after this player that's at Grambling or at Southern or wherever it may be. You do that and you allow teams to pay for a kid and go get a kid when they have a position of need. What stops them from doing it in the middle of the summer when they need somebody? What stops them from doing it in the middle of the spring when they need somebody? If you open up that guardrail right now, if you think there's no hold bars now, there'll be no holds bars when that happens too. That's number one for me. Number two, I brought up the employee thing. I understand that it works for European soccer. They're also employees. And it works for coaches because they're employees. There's no way until you structure this correctly that this will ever, not even will it never work, it will never happen until there's more structure. Because
just to jump in there, when the revenue sharing comes into place, though, don't the players, aren't they essentially becoming employees, or are they still not classified as employees?
Their classification is like a third-party contractor. They're not technically an employee. So if I'm a contractor, and the way that I understand it is you're a third-party contractor. Maybe I'm wrong here. They're not employees. Are you paying them health care?
That's a good point.
They're not employees. Third-party contractor, if they're a W-2, W-4 employee, they're not getting paid like that. I'm not trying to get in the weeds, and you're right, I could be wrong, but they're not going to be employees, correct? Unless I'm just going nutso. And then what's the baseline? And my third point, while you look that up, I'll just get to this. What's the money value?
Like a buyout?
Yeah, how do you determine that value?
Well, that's something that's a little bit more broad reaching that I don't think we can answer right this second. But one would assume that if you sign a kid and you sign him to an NIL deal, that's the one part about this that I think it gets missed out, is that said small program would have to have an established NIL contract, revenue sharing contract, whatever it is. So say a kid in an HBCU program or a high level FCS is getting $100,000.
He's not buyout. Okay.
The buyout would be wouldn't it be the equivalent of whatever that contract is? Isn't that how the coach?
It's normally 2 years. It's normally a 2-year deal. Like if you sell a company, it's normally what the gross of that company's next 2 years salary or gross would be. So if my company was worth $1 million, I could charge $3 million for it, evaluation of it.
So I guess that kind of answers the question, though, how much the buyouts would be worth, which, again, if you could have an FCS kid making $100,000. I've heard of programs paying their quarterbacks that, or their top player that. They'll pay him $100,000-$200,000. The other guys will get what are the remaining money is there.
A ketchup packet and a thing of Skittles.
So these schools that have all this revenue sharing bread, and if they wanted to offer a big time small school transfer, however amount of money, I think that they would have that same amount available for a buyout. I don't think it would be highly unrealistic for them to be able to afford that.
Look, in the hypothetical world of this happening, okay, I'm not opposed to it, right? I'm not opposed to that happening. I would give you one massive risk. And here is a massive risk. You think your roster is getting purged now. Wait until some of these teams post-spring start missing on kids and they can go buy out a player from your roster.
Well, but I feel like that already happens, though. I feel like that already occurs, does it not?
Not to this level, though. Think about it like this. I was talking to Carter Bryant, who, he's big in soccer or whatever. He comes on my show every Monday. I asked him this. I was like, so what happens when teams start missing, like soccer leagues start missing? He's like, well, they just go spend money to get dudes, just to get warm bodies, because they need the warm bodies. They actually need somebody that can, to play the position. I don't feel like it's doing it that bad now, But then my other question would be, what if it's a P4 school to a P4 school? Is it only beneficial for FCS and G5 like affiliates?
Well, no, but then I would argue that ends up being where it has arguably the most impact at a very underrated level, because one, if a school, say like Pitt, has a really good player and he's playing really well, and they're offering him like $1 million or whatever to come transfer, they then get more money funded into their program that they can use to go and bring in other players to, to replenish the rest of their roster. Okay. But the other part about this too is that buyout now ends up making the cost of trying to go and take that player, it makes it so expensive that theoretically the initial school could keep that player. You see what I'm saying? It could ultimately deter so many moves, because it ends up costing some transfer portal players so much money that it would just be cheaper for Pitt in this instance to just raise the current salary of the player or rate that they're paying him.
I can't.
So many layers to this.
Here's my thought. The last time we did something like this in college athletics,
yes,
we all knew that recruiting had its underbelly. We all knew that recruiting and how the sausage was made. It wasn't out in public. We all knew how it happened. It wasn't out in public. But you gave coaches and institutions the free will to go out in the public and pretty much do it at will. What happens if now you do this type of situation again, and Texas just says, and we'll talk about Texas, so I'm going to throw them in there, and they're like, you want $250,000? You want $1 million? We really want this kid. He could be the difference between us being really good and very good. I don't think $1 million or whatever the value stops them. I know it's a lot of money, and I get what you're saying. It would be a select few of teams that do it. There's a reason the Premier League's only had 3 different champions.
Right. That is true.
So, again, what did the Premier League do other than just give other people money? It didn't do anything, because the same 3 teams keep winning. By the way, newsflash to everybody. Knock on wood. Guess what? Wait for it. It's damn near the same thing in college football.
Well, okay, but so this is my whole point with this, though, is that at the current moment, Blake, the points that you're making right now are true. The schools that have money will spend it. They will. If there is an added financial requirement that is included in this whole process, the schools that have the money will end up still spending it. They will spend more if they need to. They don't care. I think that the big difference now with this potential buyout is that it allows for those schools that their players are already getting poached, their players are already getting called up and reached out to their agents. Right. They at the very least get something in return. Right now they're getting nothing in return. The kid just says, "Peace, I'm out. I got my money. My agent just signed this deal for me. I'm going to leave. Coach, best of luck. I'll talk to you later. I'll stay in touch. I'll maybe come to the homecoming game in a couple of years," like that kind of shit. Instead, they're getting money that can go towards resources to either bringing in another player or boosting their locker room. Think about it this way. Hold on one second before you jump in. The buy games that occur where an FCS program has to travel to go and play an FBS program, where the FBS program pays the smaller level teams, even the G5 teams, to travel to them to get their asses kicked. That $500,000 that goes
right,
like that funded a whole new new software for us for a season, new computers for our coaches when we played Virginia Tech. So in this circumstance, you get $200,000 because a kid left, $300,000. Imagine what you get in terms of resources. You're now getting the benefits of producing good players.
I understand it from that aspect. So the last thing I'd say here, this is where my mind goes. That if this gets passed, that we would live in a world where, let's just say tomorrow, Monday morning, Pete Thamel wakes up from ESPN and says, sources, the University of Texas, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the Ohio State Buckeyes have reached an agreement with so-and-so player worth $1 million and bought out their contract to the lower school, where That is an insane thought. It's an insane process that you can go to the individual player and say, listen, we're going to do a buyout with you. We're going to make you money. It's going on now, and we know it. But it brought up my first point. We didn't know how the sausage was made when everything was behind closed doors. We allowed that door to creak open a little bit, then it got kicked down. What happens when they get a match and a thing of gasoline and they're standing in the house and they can go do it at free will? Even more, so I get what you're saying. It does, you're right. The benefit of this, you're 1,000% right. The benefit of it is those smaller schools get paid for something and they don't get poached. The problem that I have, and I think the alternative to that is I feel like that I've seen these bigger schools say, oh, all right, so you're going to let us do this out in the open now? We're going to show your ass. And then they keep dominating the sport anyway. So, and to some extents, Joe, I could make an argument. Texas is back. Are they not? Well, what has happened since Texas has been back? Well, Sark, NIL, they got the #1 recruiting class in the country. How did that happen? Justice Terry went to On3. Well, I'm actually going to talk about Justice Terry, a big part of my piece tonight when we talk about Texas. Joe, he literally went to On3 and said, I am a Georgia Bulldog. ... It's in the article. They gave your boy a bigger bag. That's exactly what he said. And so to me, I'm like, that's already happening in today's world. What happens when you light a match? Like, I'll give an example. South Carolina signed a linebacker from Grambling. This is what Mickey's talking about. He wants South Carolina to pay because they developed a kid that was under-recruited. That's what he's really trying to get at here.
Yeah, right. That kid just disappears, gone. Well, they got to replace him, and they get nothing out of it. If Mickey Joseph got called up tomorrow and he got offered a new contract, Grambling at least gets a.
Well, he'd go to LSU.
Well, he'd leave, but at least though that there would be some sort of return for Grambling because LSU would have to pay the buyout or whatever.
But I would caution, if you think teams would not go and do that, and just if they think that they're on a borderline and they can get this player, I
understand where the premise of you bringing this up is. My only issue is though that like
I feel like worse for G5 and FCS teams is what I'm trying to say.
But I think that at the very least, I don't think it ramps it up that much. And at the very least, that those schools it allows for it to happen more frequently, sure, but at the same time, it at least gives those schools some sort of return. Like right now, that's what the biggest disparity in those programs right now is that they don't get any. They have a kid who does well and he leaves, they're screwed.
We talk about Texas and look who shows up.
Yeah. I muted him first.
I'm assuming this is Josh over at Stripe Sports. Says it's different than Premier League deals. These deals can be a one-year deal. Teams will be less inclined to double the dip. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, again, Joe, what is Texas? So we're going to talk about Texas tonight. Again, bring this up. They needed interior defensive linemen, did they not?
Yes.
Kids went in the portal and within days they were committed. Like, let's not act like if they feel like that they need a need that they're not going to go out there and spend the money to fill that need regardless, because they will. Like, let's not sugarcoat this now. That's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, all right. When we come back, we're going to talk about our good friends over at MyBookie, but when we come back, we're going to do our buy or sell recruiting, Kansas, Illinois, and all of this to the Florida fans. I am legitimately sending to all
I like Florida, dude, and I've rooted for Florida, but I'm a smart bettor. I have, you don't know this.
That finish last night with Houston and Duke was insane.
It was better than the Florida finish. Florida played a great game, but I think the difference is that Houston should not have won, but their defense prevailed against the team that has the first overall pick on it, who they stopped in that final possession. I have been hitting 67% on my college basketball bets, which is an insane rate. So you guys should listen to me.
So I have a third of a chance of losing. I'll pass.
That's not how that works.
Let me throw this out there.
Okay.
I do not believe that Houston should have won because I don't think that foul late was good. Was it the foul got called on flag, did it not? And the kid went to the free throw line and knocked down both free throws. By the way, the shot was missed and Duke rebounded it. I mean, how many seconds can you run off the clock there? I mean, I'm just – come on.
It's fair.
That's a ticky-tack over the back to call in that entire situation. They got a little help. And listen, let me point this out too. To win national titles, you always need luck in certain situations. You need talent, and you do need luck. Like, name a national champion that didn't get a break in something.
That's a good
Name
point.
one.
That's why. That's what stands out to me with Houston, though, is that they. Although, I'm surprised you watched the game because you always make it seem like you don't like college basketball that much.
I've got to turn over a new leaf. I got shit I got to do. So, hey, dude, by the way, met the year goal, lost 100. So we're gonna find a new goal this year. I think it's to take Ruffino and Joe Show and AYS. We're gonna soar, baby, soar like the eagles fly. Fly, Eagles fly. All right, let's get to it. Do it here, Joe. So recruiting. So we're gonna do this little new segment, buy or sell. So there are some interesting teams in the top 10 in recruiting. I don't know if you've been noticing. Actually, I know that you have been noticing, but. Yes. There are some very interesting teams in the top 10, top 15 that are in recruiting right now, like Kansas, Illinois, Louisville. And I'm not going to say USC is it's not weird to see USC in the top 10, if I'm being honest.
But for them to be number one overall at the current moment is unexpected.
All right, well, let's go to USC first. Are you buying or selling the USC Trojans, who currently, as of April the 6th, have the number one recruiting class in the country? Are you buying or selling that they'll be able to continue this kind of run in recruiting?
Blake, I've been a really huge critic of Lincoln Riley and his recruiting efforts, and I think that it would be natural for everyone to sit here and assume the way that I talk about USC that I would just immediately say I'm out. I'm out. But here is what
I can't believe you're about to do it.
No, but there's one underlying thing about this of why I'm actually bought in. Lincoln Riley's actually doing the right shit. Anyone who has paid close attention to the recruiting landscape and who has paid attention to this recruiting class they've put together, they're finally doing the one thing that we have spoken so negative. They're actually recruiting Southern California. They're actually putting an emphasis on recruiting Southern California. I look at all of the locations of where a lot of their top guys come from. Brandon Lockhart comes from Los Angeles. You have RJ Sermons, who comes from Rancho Cucamonga. You have Trent Mosley, who comes from Santa Margarita, California, Rancho Santa Margarita. You are actually putting an emphasis on keeping the guys that are local, that you've taken a ton of pride on playing for this USC program, and you're keeping them home. There is one underlying difference here. And of course, we find a way to tie it back into Notre Dame. Chad Bowden, who was the general manager at Notre Dame, left because USC was aggressive about going and getting him, and they brought him in. And it is very clear that he knows how to go about roster building. And the way that you build a good roster at USC is you have a lot of guys that are proud to be representing Southern California and are staying in the area with all of the dang good high schools that are in the surrounding region. So that is by far the biggest takeaway from all of this early recruiting buzz before the summer comes around, that USC, if they finish top 5, I would not be shocked. I think it's going to happen.
All right. I am so proud of you, but you're going to laugh at me saying.
Don't be proud of me.
I am with you. I am actually buying it mainly due to the fact it does feel as if, I say they're locking the state down. It's a term that I've used in a long time, but they're locking their biggest region down. Yeah. Let's just put it that way.
Southern California is a separate state, basically. Northern California is a completely different part of the country. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, they are starting to do so. It's funny, Joe. The one thing that we talked about on National Signing Day that they could not do is that they got obliterated by Oregon and Ohio State and some specific schools from around the country that took some of the top talent out of California. The conversation that you and I had was, so what did Pete Carroll do when he had that massive run? Well, he had Lane, he had Sark, he had Orgeron, who was basically his associate head coach, who damn near ran everything in recruiting, and they just didn't leave outside of the state of California. I remember Ed Orgeron talking about one day in a press conference. They asked him, it was like a spring practice. It was during COVID, so there was nothing going on. And they were like, Coach, I mean, there's nothing going on. tell us a story about recruiting at USC. He goes, I went in a 30-mile radius, north, south, east, and west. And and Pete told me my job is dependent on me locking down this region. Joe, they got like 98% of those kids. They lost like 3 in like a decade-long span. That is what he's got to do to get them back. It's the only way. You got to lock down the people that want to grow up and be a Trojan. That, like, you have to. You cannot convince me, well, kids these days, they don't. No, that's bullshit. USC is thrown in their face every which way. You know it and I know it. So you got to lock that down. Now, Xavier Griffin, who's the only 5-star that they have committed out of the state of Georgia. I don't know if that stays. But the kids
I don't get why they keep doing that, by the way. They keep going for these kids in the state of Georgia.
They have some Georgia staff guys on their staff. So it is what it is there. But, I mean, they came in Louisiana and took the number 2 kid, and they paid him a crap load of money. I mean, they will pay money. For Lincoln has got to just start locking down this other region. So I'm going to be with you. I'm buying it too.
Yeah, I think that has been the biggest difference this year compared to the past, because last summer they had a very aggressive push, and they saw, or they didn't sign, but they had commitments from a number of guys that were out of state. And if you listen to any national recruiting shows, which I listen to a bunch of them to kind of get caught up on the names and know what's coming up. And at the time, a lot of the national analysts were saying, like, these are great commitments, but I don't know if they stick. That is a very long way for kids to travel. As much as money is really important, you're getting similar money all over the country. These guys still value being close to home and their parents being able to go to the games. Their parents also have an influence on their decisions more than ever, because they're trying to make sure that they make careful decisions and aren't just chasing money. Those with really good upbringings with good parents that are teaching them and trying to give them the right insight. So the guys that are coming cross country has always been a question mark to me. Those that are in and around California committing early, those kids aren't going to decommit. I would be really shocked if they end up decommitting. Like, well, I think that's like Oregon, so unlikely.
Well, unless Oregon or a team like that goes in there and takes them.
Well, so that's the biggest part about all this, is that they're getting those guys that are local early, and it's easier to recruit the local guys because they're just right around the corner to you. They're all within a couple of hours drive. You're doing that before Oregon can start to reach their fingers in, and you know, Washington and all those other northwestern schools start gripping in. So them getting it done now is incredibly huge for them actually finishing with the top 5 class.
The other team here, Joe, that we have to talk about is Kansas. Kansas currently sits with the 7th best class in the country. They did the exact same thing that USC did. Dude, they're dominating the state of Kansas recruiting. Now, I don't know how many great players come from the state of Kansas. I'm not going to act like I do. I am selling this. I mean, they were the 56th class in the country last year. They're getting kids out of their own state to commit now. But as recruiting continues to go on, it's not like we just got done talking about USC. Kansas is not the place that's going to go out there and just start shelling money and start being competitive when it comes to that kind of stuff. They're at 7th right now. Joe, I would be shocked if they end in the top 25. When I look at their recruiting class, okay, they got the top 3 kids in Kansas. They have done a really good job at the current moment of what they've done. They got 14 commits, okay? The problem is that I have with that, Joe, is, man, I don't know if teams come out of the state of Kansas. There's a lot of uncommitted kids, a lot. And they're going to fall, and they're going to fall drastically. Maybe they can get in the top 30, and that's great for them. I got to sell this because, man, I would need to see the unprecedented before I start saying I'm going to start buying something.
I would say sell, but like with the caveat that they could still finish with a top 3 Big 12 class, but they're probably not going to scratch the top 15. You just brought up, it's really interesting that they're sticking with a lot of guys in Kansas, and then a lot of the remaining guys are from states in the general area. What's really interesting when I was reading up on this is that a lot of analysts are saying that this is like a rare year for talent in the state of Kansas. So they've done a good job early of getting involved with a lot of the recruits in the state of Kansas. But the fact that this class is getting boosted by the fact that they have 2 4-stars and mostly just a lot of 3-star commits, as soon as like all of the top kids start committing to other schools, even if they keep most of this core together, Caden Snyder and JJ Dunnigan, who are the 2 top guys that they have, the corner and the offensive tackle, as soon as all those other uncommitted guys ahead of them, like you kind of just said, start to commit to all the big programs, the point scoring for how these classes work out, they're going to slide down dramatically. If they finish top 25, that's an awesome class for them. I'm selling on them being 7th because it's inflated like crazy. But at the same time, they're doing some of the right things by grabbing these 4-star kids that are in state.
Joe, they only had 6 kids enroll and 9 signed their letter of intent.
Last class?
Yeah, so they had 15. They ended 56. They're at 14 right now. They went and got 22 players out of the transfer portal. 22. So, listen, when I say sell, it's a lot like what happened to them last year. They went and got the local kids early. They got what the things surrounding them. Then they went and vastly destroyed the portal for them. People reacted, look at Kansas, top 7 class. Get out of my face with that. They're not going to – Joe, I feel confident in this. They will not stay in the top 30. Very confident.
Yeah, I probably won't happen.
It's
yeah.
not.
No, I don't disagree with that.
It's not going to
happen.
happen.
But it doesn't mean they can't have a good class for their standards.
No, what are they doing? They're getting the local kids that they know that probably won't transfer, developing and building from within. They have to go about it a unique way. But to be in a top 30 situation, it's not going to happen. Well, look, here's the truth now. Kansas got money. They spend it all. Let's not act like they don't. The reason that they're competitive in basketball the way that they are is because they spend money in basketball like any – don't sleep on them for money. They put $25 million to their football stadium, whatever, and renovations and things like that. Okay, great. But spare me on that you're going to go out there and start spending money for NIL and football. All right. Joe, another one here. The Illinois Fighting Illini, currently one of the top classes in the 2026 recruiting class. They sit at 11th per 247 with 11 commits. Are you buying or selling that Illinois is a pusher in the recruiting ranks?
Man, I want to buy because I feel like Brett Bielema knows how to recruit. But I'm gonna have to go sell here.
Yes.
Another recruiting class that's kind of boosted by signing a couple of 4-stars and just like a bit. They have 10 commits at the current moment. I'm not gonna. I always get like really caught up with like where these kids are committing from. You know, a lot of kids from Texas and from Florida that are committed to Illinois. Like in all seriousness, like
there's a flip alert. It's on their horizon.
There's a bunch of kids from Orlando and from the surrounding areas. There's a kid from Denton, Texas, Tampa, Florida, and then their top 2 recruits are from Ohio. The Ohio kids are realistic to end up sticking, but plain and simple, you talk to recruits
in the cold.
Right. You talk to kids that are from Florida that go to schools that are in the cold. Ask them if they thought it was a good idea or not. And they will always tell you that they're freezing their asses off.
Did you hear Micah Parsons this week on the podcast with Derrick Henry?
Yeah, I saw the clip.
He was like, I went down south to Alabama and I watched the practice and I'm like, it's too damn hot down here for me to be work my ass off like that. So I think the opposite could be happening here.
Right.
I am massively selling here too. Come on. Come on. I mean, some of these schools that people are freaking out about buying or selling up top for some of these teams. Let's listen to some of these. Penn State, Miami, Oregon, A&M, LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, USC. That's not out of the realm for me. When I look at Illinois as an example, they're above Notre Dame, Tennessee, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida State. No, that's not going to happen. You know who all of these teams are ahead of right now? Georgia. No. Stop. Yeah. Please, God, stop what you're doing. Please. Illinois and the city of Chicago legitimately has a lot of good football players. They produce some insane football players. You know where most of them go? Ohio State. That is a fact. So until you can show me that Ryan Day doesn't have a 1-800 number straight to the city of Chicago and the surrounding areas, please spare me that the Illinois Fighting Illini are going to be anywhere sniffing the top 25 yet again. Joe, let's look at them last year. Their 2025 class, not necessarily a bad one, but they had 13 enrollees, and they had 9 players sign their letter of intent. Wait, none of them outside of the North? One kid from Florida? Oh, okay. So exactly what you just mentioned. They finished 46 last year. 46.
That would be an astronomical jump if they ended up finishing in the top. The top 10 is unrealistic. Having a mid-level Big Ten recruiting class is doable for them. It's just and this is the same thing that applies for the last one that we had on here that we wanted to talk about, which was Louisville.
Oh, I'm buying Louisville stock.
Well, but the thing that is automatically applied for these conversations is that if you don't have a commitment from like a big name kid or a couple big name kids that are at least high 4 stars, it's not the top players in your class might stay committed. That's not what the conversation is. Can you attract anybody else big to buoy the whole class?
Because you will have to keep it there.
Right.
Right.
And none of these other teams outside of USC, I feel confident that they're going to grab somebody big in the area.
Louisville did at one point have Reuben Owens committed for a long time. Here's how I'm going to take it with Louisville. From a numbers rankings, yes, I don't think that they can in there. So I'm selling on them being a top 25 class. I don't think it can happen. Joe, who was one of the best running backs in the ACC last year? Isaac Brown. And where did he go to? He went to Louisville. What has Louisville done that a lot of teams that go, let me just say it like this. Louisville has done something that goes unnoticed around the country. Joe, I feel like every year Louisville is just popping up and they're finding dudes.
Well, and they're developing better than anybody else. So it's like I don't need Louisville to end up having like a 5-star kid come in. I just don't. I would rather that they continue to thrive with the low 4 stars, high 3 stars, and develop them because those are the players that have played the best, or bringing in a key transfer.
Am I crazy in thinking this? Why is it every year I feel like under Braum, this going to be – so I say every year, the last 2 years. I'm like, this dude found a gem. It's like that Louisville went into recruiting like on College Football 25. They found a gem that everybody was sleeping on. You know how when you recruit in College Football 25, you can find these hidden gems. And all of a sudden, it's like, what in the hell is going on? Why do they keep – so I take it from sale if you're just going to go by recruiting rankings, right? If you just go by the rankings, yes, I'm with you because there's not going to happen. But the last 2 years, Braum and company have just found like good football players, really good football players. They are surrounding themselves by like, why isn't this kid getting recruited? And then you got Isaac Brown that shows up and dominates the ACC. Right. I am buying that part. I'm not
gonna go buy like fully. They're not gonna finish the top 10 class, but like if they top 25, I think it's totally in the ballpark.
It's definitely doable. But I'm buying. I am buying that they are identifying and scouting better than anybody. That's what I'm buying.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, nice little segment there. We don't get to talk about recruiting
catch up. Well, we're probably gonna need to do it more because there ain't gonna be shit to talk about for the next.
That is very true.
Couple of weeks.
We do start though, Joe. Finally, we start doing some of these previews for these teams and what we believe will be in the top 25. Obviously, Texas coming off a fantastic year, ending in the Final Four yet again. Were the Longhorns. In their first year of the SEC, Joe competed for the SEC championship, getting beat by Georgia there. But a very good season, back-to-back years for Texas with Final Four finishes. Now we look at Texas and going into the 2025 season. Joe, they got a new quarterback. They got new receivers. They got new interior defensive linemen. They got new corners. They got new safeties. When you look at the Texas Longhorns going into the 2025 season and you doing a deep dive on them, where do you see their 2025 season going?
There's a lot to talk about here with Texas, and like we're going to take this piece by piece. We're going to talk about their schedule in a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of these big recruits that you mentioned that you wrote down that you want to get to, because they've got some dudes and some young dudes that could end up contributing very early. But we have to talk about this first, Blake. This team has a very talented, explosive core of former 5-star guys that are entering their second and third years. Ryan Wingo at wide receiver. Arch Manning is finally going to start at quarterback. CJ Baxter is coming back from injury at running back, and he is going to be backed up likely by Trey Wisner. You've got Colin Simmons coming off the edge and Anthony Hill Jr. roaming behind him. But before we can laud all of those players, I just have to highlight, and as I mentioned in the open, there is a bit of a pendulum for outcomes here. I'm not saying that they go 7-5, but an underwhelming season could occur because they have a lot of losses. Kelvin Banks, Matthew Golden, Jade Barron, Alfred Collins, Cameron Williams, Isaiah Bond, Andrew Makuba, Gunnar Helm, and Quinn Ewers. That's not even every single guy that they're losing, but those are all guys outside of maybe Ewers are in striking range of being drafted in the top 150 this upcoming draft.
Yeah.
I opened the conversation with this not to say that I don't believe in Texas. I still stand by that. My preseason national championship pick is Texas at the current moment, and we will dig further. But we have to acknowledge here that there has to be massive step up at all of those positions, especially at their offensive line, because they're basically replacing the entire unit.
All right, so I'm not going to go down the players. You took the first part of my thought on that about like, hey, dude,
yes,
they have serious talent returning. They have serious talent coming in from this freshman class that I'll get to in just a minute, as you alluded to. You're replacing Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, and Cameron Williams along your offensive line. Now you have Gooseby, you have Hudson, you have Campbell and Baker and others that you're going to hope that fill in these roles, give or take whoever player you think. But the overarching theme here is you have 4 offensive linemen that they have recruited very well there. Can they develop and have they developed along the offensive line where you can replace what you're losing? Now, the question would be, Joe, it's a lot like what we talked about with Georgia. Are you upgrading by some of these guys moving on? Okay. I'm not saying that you replace a Kelvin Banks, but as an overall unit, can you be better? There were moments, Joe, they just could not run the football. So now you have a team coming off a year where they couldn't run the football. CJ Baxter, less or not, they could not run the football. Now, you brought up Trey Wisner being back. The protection of Arch, the running game with Wisner and Baxter coming back. I know that Blue is moving on here. Joe, that is the crux of their team. Like, that is the real crux of like, hey, we see this immense talent at Texas all over the place. The question ultimately becomes, well, you are replacing 4 offensive linemen, and I don't want to hear, because Sark hasn't necessarily had to do this completely yet in this kind of run, how is he as a developer? That's the question. For right now, we have to assume that they can get into a Final Four and that they'll be fine. I look at them, though, at wide receiver as well. Now, you have Ryan Wingo returning. You do have DeAndre Moore returning. The issue is that outside, are those 2 guys going to be number ones? That would be my question. Now, you have Khalil Lockett, you have Jamie French, that are both coming in and are talented freshmen, very talented freshmen. That Joe, at that position, at wide receiver, a freshman can come in and contribute today.
Well, Ryan Wingo quite literally just did. Well, my only slight pushback with that, though, is that last year was an incredibly rare year for freshmen that came in.
Hold on. Hold on now. I'm not saying that I'm just saying there is an exception to receiver more than most. I'm still not on the path that freshmen just come in and contribute right away. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying.
Right, fair.
Okay.
Fair.
But I do look at them defensively. This is where they're the most dangerous, and this is where I want to take this. You brought up Anthony Hill Jr., Colin Simmons, Ethan Burke, and Trey Moore return. By the way, they added Brad Spence, which arguably the most underrated pickup in the SEC.
Well, let me add you another guy that's also important, too, for this conversation. Cole Brevard the defensive tackle that they added from Purdue is in very like this is the prototype of the defensive tackles that they've pumped out of the last couple of years. So like 2 years ago, they had the behemoths with Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat that were phenomenal and that were great players. And then this past year, you have Alfred Collins, who's going to get drafted really high, who's a great run defender. Cole Brevard is a massive, strong-ass dude. And another guy, like I keep bringing up Purdue. I watched a weird amount when I was working for a scouting consulting agency. I kept getting assigned freaking Purdue games. That Purdue roster and that team not being better than it was is mind-blowing to me because they had some freaking underrated guys. Brevard is a headache. He is going to be a monster for them on that defensive line. Not going to put up crazy production, but he's going to free up Anthony Hill. And that's that their defensive line transfer portal recruiting has been nuts. And that's a big reason why I feel pretty good about their current state.
Well, and that's where I was going to go. The crux would be for them. Well, look, you did go and get defensive tackles out of the portal, Bradford being one, Travis Shaw being another. Like, look, I mean, it's only a matter of time before everybody kind of hits and miss sometimes in the portal. I don't think that's Bradford. To the point here, their front seven is insane. It is absolutely ridiculous. We talked about this when we brought up Colin Simmons and we brought up Anthony Hill Jr. To that point, they're going to be able to get after teams like nobody's business. Brother, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, Brad Spence, and Anthony Hill Jr. might be the best pass rush that I've ever seen in my life in college. It has that potential. Think about what you're saying at the current moment. You have two dudes that are coming off seasons with damn near double-digit sacks. You have Trey Moore returning who didn't have the production because Colin Simmons is like, hello. And then Ethan Burke, who's a really good run defender, but still can get in there in pass rush situations. Joe, this is about to get insane. It really is. I do wonder, and the biggest thing about Texas from a defensive side of things, you might have one of, if not the best front sevens in the SEC, maybe the country. Joe, can they cover? Because you're replacing a lot in that DB room. By the way, you got a whole new secondaries coach. We act like this shit doesn't matter and that teams are immune by it. We used to think that Nick was immune by it. He wasn't. He would do good from a coordinator perspective, but when he would have some position changes along coaches, sometimes it didn't work. That's why dudes would at Alabama get fired. You're replacing Jahdae Barron and Andrew Makuba. Joe, that's big.
Great defensive backs.
Great defensive backs. Now you got Derek Williams returning, but you do go get the most unique human being in all of recruiting last year in Jonah Williams. Toffee returns. So you got safeties. You got some corners that you can go in there and plug and play. I think dude, I got to be real with you. I do think that you are right about them. They have the potential to be one of the top 4 teams yet again in the country. The problem with them is that if something did go bad, offensive line, run game, defense could be their secondary. But Joe, like even when talking about that front seven that's going to win them football games, we didn't bring up if Justice Terry. You talked about Bradford. You didn't even talk about Justice Terry. Like,
right.
I mean, what if Justice Terry goes and listen, let's just say hypothetically, for what it's worth, let's say that he's not even a starter. By the way, Colin Simmons didn't start last year. He was a rotational player. Hypothetically, if Justice Terry is what your 2 deep is, that is the part where I'm at. Like,
yes,
I want to be like, I want to come out here and say from a Texas perspective, look, there's a lot of things that concern me, but then I just see all that talent. I'm like, damn, they got a lot of dudes, man.
Well, that's where I come from here with this conversation. And like I set it up off of like, okay, here's everybody that's leaving that needs to be brought up. They have been one of the best recruited teams over the last couple of years. And It all came full head in 2025 when they had their best recruiting class in that span. I said all that at the beginning to say, I'm not really that worried about all these departures. And I think the biggest one in any other circumstance, Blake, we would sit on here. If I told you a multi-year starting quarterback was leaving, a former number 1 overall recruit at quarterback was leaving, we would be sitting here talking about, man, what the hell are they going to be? What are they going to be? Who's the new guy and who are they going to sit in? Who's going to start? This is one of the most This is the most rare circumstance. Right. I know a lot of people.
They might have even upgraded.
That's what I'm getting at here. A lot of people want to push pause on Arch Manning and say, like, let's let the kid play first. I understand that, but he's shown us a lot of really brilliant things that typically we don't get from guys when they spot start or they come in for a series. He has shown a very nice natural playmaking ability, and I love the fact that year 3 is when he's playing. This isn't his redshirt freshman year. This isn't even his freshman year. This has been a situation that has been able to incubate and to process, and we have been able to let it be patient and not rushed. It's one of the few times that we could say that for the future, and also in the most current past, that a guy was willing to sit and wait and to develop at the current school that he is at. And I stand by this. I said this immediately post national championship, and why Texas is my national championship pick is that I firmly believe what held back Texas was Quinn Ewers. I am sorry, Texas fans that love Quinn Ewers, and I'm sorry too, Quinn Ewers. You did some great things in college, but his inability to step up to the plate and make big plays in crucial situations, to more importantly make the worst possible outcome occur, was what held them back. The fumble that he had where Jack Sawyer stripped it from him, the interception that he threw against Arizona State, plus the litany of other turns. His whole entire career, the mistakes added up so much. I know we haven't seen Arch Manning play, but I feel like as long as Arch alleviates 15 to 20% of those turnovers and those types of mistakes, this team is going to ascend to a new level. They are, and when you talk to anybody in the college football world, like, a lot of people think Texas is going to win it this year, and I agree.
All right. I will not say that they will win it. I'm not going to go that far. Okay. There are a lot of positives, like I mentioned earlier. The positives for me are that you might have the best front seven in the country. Dude, they're insane there. I think that the amount of talent that you potentially have at wide receiver, the simple fact that they didn't go out in the portal and get a receiver when Sark is an offensive-minded dude, should tell you exactly what he feels like, that what he has and what he has returning. We didn't bring up Gunnar Helm that is not returning. Like, what are they going to be at tight end? And Sark's offense is predicated, NFL or this one, even at Alabama. He wants somebody at tight end that can catch. A possession tight end. That is all. Gunnar Helm had 60 catches last year, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, he damn near had 7 touchdowns. He was a big weapon for them. The thing for me, though, Joe, that won't allow me to say that they're a national contending team, like national championship contending, meaning like I think that they'll be in the game. Dude, when you're replacing 4 offensive linemen, and then if you're replacing the 4, and then you couldn't run the football last year, what would give me the confidence, CJ Baxter or not, Arch Manning or not, because he's still going to go through some growing pains here. Like, I do think that there's a, I don't want to say wait and see, but I kind of pumped the brakes for me. I pumped the brakes for me in the sense of those guys that were starting last year, the guys that are replacing them are not young classmen, like underclassmen. They weren't. You have junior, senior. So it's not as if like, hey, you just had a lot of young guys sitting around there. No, not really. So those guys were sitting behind the guys that really struggled a year ago. Now, developing in a year, Joe, I lost 100 pounds in a year. Anything can happen in a year, right? I mean, last year I had 150 more pounds on my face. That's what I feel like. And now it's gone. Anything can happen. My only point would be is that I need to see Texas perform up front offensively, because it's such a big deal. I don't care what Arch has. I don't care what happens outside. I am worried about them with their front 5. Now, the opposite takes place when you talk about their defensive line. But here's a good thing. If you're trying to build competition, boy, that O-line's got more competition than anybody in the country, and they could sharpen them. You're going to know what you have this spring and, well, this fall.
To round up this conversation, I want to bring up their schedule. So I know that you looked at it, but I'm going to read through it really quickly here. At Ohio State versus San Jose State versus UTEP versus Sam Houston, at Florida versus Oklahoma on the neutral site for anyone who doesn't know that they play in a neutral site, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State versus Vanderbilt, at Georgia versus Arkansas versus Texas A&M. So here's my thing, and you and I started arguing about this in the open, and I wanted to wait to get to it. I think that their schedule with the same opponents is easier. I know that you have to travel to Georgia and you have to travel to Ohio State, but you get to travel to Ohio State a year removed from winning the national title with their entire roster gone. So you get the advantage of taking on a brand new team that is going to be trying to figure itself out. I'm not saying they kick the shit out of Ohio State. I don't think that's going to happen. But what you're afforded is that in a late game situation to square off with a team that's going to have a lot of young starters, a lot more than your team. You're going to be able to get revenge for that Cotton Bowl performance. Traveling to Florida and Georgia is going to be tough. But the fact that their other SEC road games are Kentucky and Mississippi State, they don't have to travel to Texas A&M. They don't have to travel to Vanderbilt, which isn't very hard. And and they get to host Arkansas. The two hardest trips that they have are arguably the two worst teams in the conference.
All right. I'm going to give you a hot take.
Uh-oh.
You going to Gainesville. And in a month span, you're on the road for 3 straight weeks with a very young team. Nuh-uh. Miss me with that. You have a very, very young team.
Yeah, but Florida's also going to be figuring their shit out. I'm not saying that that's a guaranteed win, but I don't know if it's as much of a. It will be a hard matchup. Let me put it. Wait. Let me actually finish your take. Finish your take. What you're going with here?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that if you lose that Florida and that Georgia game, I still see a 10-2 team. A 10-2 team just won a national championship.
Well, then you're selling that they're beating Ohio State.
I think that they beat Ohio State. I think that they beat them.
Here's what I'm saying. I think you're discrediting A&M. I think Georgia on the road is tough. Who knows what the hell goes on with Oklahoma? Who in the what if I come in here 6 months or 5 months from now and say, hey, remember when we did a Texas deep dive and we never talked about them losing that game because John Mateer went off? Not doing that yet. I'm also not going to say on the road at Florida when you beat the dog shit out of them. By the way, no DJ Lagway. None. I think Florida is better than anybody's giving them credit for. I'm not going to say they're figuring their shit out. They're not as good as Texas. I could see an upset on one of these. Now, to your point, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, I mean, I know you're going to laugh at this, and it's fine. Texas is a field goal away from losing to Vanderbilt on the road last year. Don't tell me that it doesn't happen. Don't tell me that it doesn't happen now.
Yeah, but that was last year. I don't think that applies.
Because no teams have gone into somewhere and upsets have never happened in college football.
Yeah, okay, well, shit. We can sit here and every time we do one of these previews, man, what if they just lose one that they're not supposed to? Yeah, that happens with every team. We're looking at their schedule in a vacuum right now. We're looking at all right, if everything goes in these particular matchups, if we just look at head to head, no injuries, no nothing, they just squared off with that team, road environment, home environment, whatever it is. I see an 11-1, 10-2 season.
Joe, listen, they play on the road at Florida. They go to neutral site. So this is away. Okay, get this: at Florida, at Kentucky, neutral site Oklahoma, at Mississippi State. They got Vanderbilt at home, so it's 1. Okay, and then at Georgia. So in a 6-week span, they are on the road. Last year, what I said was, hold on. What I said is that their schedule last year was easier than what this one is. It is in the sense for me that they're going to be on the road. I don't care what anybody tells me. If you go in a 6-week span and 5 games are away from your stadium, miss me with shit can't happen. Miss me.
But my emphasis point here is that they're afforded the very unique aspect of most of these games being against mediocre teams.
No,
So if they lose to Florida and they lose to Georgia, they still finish 10-2.
Again, you're not giving Ohio State enough credit, and then again, you're not giving Texas A&M enough credit. Rivalry games happen for a reason.
I feel a lot better about this Texas roster than I do the Texas A&M one.
I don't listen. I'm not saying it's difficult, because there are certain areas that it's not difficult. I could see Oklahoma and John Matier with a new offensive coordinator being better. Like I think we're just
being better. Wait, hold up. But like the way that they got outclassed last year, completely outclassed. Oklahoma did not do enough in the offseason to compete with this Texas team. They didn't. They did enough to win 8 games, or maybe 9 if everything goes perfect.
Joe, if they win 9 games, with all due respect, on Oklahoma's schedule, they're going to knock off somebody that they shouldn't. LSU, Alabama, which they did last year. Texas, they're going to have to knock off somebody.
I stand by this aspect of this schedule. I'm just saying I stand by this aspect that I have faith that their schedule allows for them. What?
Did you see that somebody, Arch Manning, it was something in revolving Arch Manning. Do you know that Peyton never beat Florida? Did you know that Eli Manning never beat Florida?
So you're trying to get at that there's some likely trend here?
As starters, by the way, as starters. Just throwing this out there. Florida might have the Manning curse. It might be the Manning curse.
Well, I don't know if it'd be the Manning curse. I would argue it's the Florida curse
for the Florida curse for the Mannings. Let me say this. I did not vet that, so if they did win, I apologize. I saw it on
Twitter. You can't just say shit then without.
Well, I literally said I saw this on Twitter to start off that point. I just saw somebody put it up there. It's like, that's really interesting. Okay.
I wonder if that's true. That'd be hilarious if that was.
Well, I do know this. Peyton never beat Florida. That one's for sure. Never beat Florida. I know that one's a 1,000% fact. In reference to Eli, I don't remember if they played that one good year that they had, but you got to remember Florida was really freaking good when Urban got there. I mean,
right.
They didn't lose the game, so then you're like, oh, well, shit. And then, Saban was at LSU, and then they just kept getting dominated. I mean,
yeah.
Revisionist history. Last thing I want to bring up about Texas before we get out of here. Last thing. What's their record? You got them going 10-2, 11-1?
My floor is 9-3. The season doesn't go well. That's the worst that they could possibly do. My ceiling is I think 12-0 is in the mix for them. I don't think it's super likely because you have those 2 road trips. But if they're as good as they're being hyped up to be, and as we just spent that time hyping them up, 12-0 is capable for Texas.
We'll see. I'd say I'm going to say a 10-2 floor, which is bigger than yours. But I'm going to
11-1 ceiling.
I'm going to go 11-1 ceiling.
That's fair.
I mean, not any wiggle room for me. Anyway, all right. We'll see y'all again tomorrow. Y'all have a good night. Peace.